name is Jessie Ace. I'm part of a group of enabled warriors that you've probably never heard of. We're fighting back against our invisible illness and taking the dis out of disability. We don't give sympathy to our symptoms. They enable us to be the warrior that we are. If you ask doctors and nurses, they'd say what we're doing is impossible. But pushing the limits of our conditions is something that we have to break through every single day. See, we push the limits. We are mentally strong, and we can do anything. The question is, how far can we push those limits? This podcast will give you the answers. I'm Jessie Ace, and this is the Disabled to Enabled podcast. Hey warriors, thanks for joining me for another episode of the Disabled to Enabled podcast with me, your host, Jessie Ace. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at Beekeepers Naturals, natural health products created by bees. Their products are so good that I've not had a cold the entire winter. Did you know that without bees, we'd have no coffee? Crazy. Check out mmini.me/bees and use code WARRIOR for 10% off today, or click the link in the show notes. By clicking this link, by the way, Beekeepers Naturals will give back to the Disabled to Enabled podcast. The Enabled Warriors, our next guest on the show, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2006 at the age of 47. A bodybuilder and former owner of fitness centres, he made the choice to fight MS head-on through bodybuilding. In 2009, at age 50, he competed in his first bodybuilding contest with multiple sclerosis, winning a most inspirational trophy. And he was also the recipient of the National MS Society's Milestone Award. In 2012, he and his wife, who's a registered nurse, created the MS Fitness Challenge. And it's the mission of the MS Fitness Challenge to provide guidance and support to people with MS and fitness professionals worldwide, with the aim to educate and train them in the benefits of exercise, nutrition, and mindset in winning the battle against MS. And he's here to chat with us today about all things MS and fitness. Enabled Warriors, please help me in welcoming the amazing David Lyons, everybody! Woo!
Hey, Jessie, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. Just getting ready to head to the gym.
Nice. Okay, let's get straight into this first part of the interview with David. So this section focuses on when he first noticed that things were being a little bit strange, and that brought him to a diagnosis. Keep listening to find out how he coped with that and thrived afterwards. And we'll have some questions from our Enabled Warriors Facebook group in part 2, and then keep on listening in part 3 for David's answers to the super quick secrets round. Are you ready for part 1, David?
Yes.
Let's do this. Let's get straight in by chatting about your initial diagnosis. So you said on your website that initially it was understandably crazy devastating for you. Can you talk about what that kind of day was like when you found yourself with partial paralysis among other symptoms? I mean, that must have been ridiculously scary.
Well, it all started in the gym. I was working out. I started to feel a really weird tingling and pain in my left arm. Initially, I just thought, well, maybe I have a pinched nerve. So I ignored it. As an athlete, we're always injuring ourselves one way or the other. So it wasn't a shock that something was bothering me. But by ignoring it, as time went by, week after week, and actually 2 months of basically just letting this disease do what it was doing to me without knowing it, I started to lose feeling from the chest down and started to get very uncoordinated. And the doctor said, at this point, we have to rush you into a hospital because we don't know what's going on here. And it was pretty devastating, especially being an athlete and never having anything like this happen to me before.
Yeah, I can imagine. And like you say, you thought it was just a pinched nerve, you didn't think anything of it at the start either, which was, did you know anything about MS beforehand?
No, because when I was diagnosed, I was actually in the hospital for 5 days. On the 4th day, after doing the MRIs and the spinal tap, and the doctor sat me down, he said, "You've got multiple sclerosis." I said, "What does that mean?" I didn't even know what the disease was. I never heard of it. I thought it was muscular dystrophy, and because that was a disease people knew about. But MS was a shock to me, especially not even understanding it.
God, yeah, I can imagine. So at this time when all this happened, you were, let's set the scene a little bit. So you were 47 years old. What was your life kind of like up to that point? What were you doing?
Well, I was a television producer. I was very successful at what I was doing. Also very involved in the fitness industry as well.
Mm.
Extremely active, always at the gym. And, this just basically blindsided me because I had nothing wrong with me and never had a major illness like this. So it really disrupted my life tremendously.
I can imagine. I mean, can you describe the lowest point of your diagnosis to us? I mean, was there a time when you literally just couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, when I left the hospital after being told by the doctor that I had so much damage done at this attack that I would virtually be in a wheelchair within 6 months, I left having a positive attitude because that's who I am.
Mm.
And I told the doctor that was never going to happen. I'll never sit in a wheelchair. But after I got home and I started to take a look at what MS was and what people were saying about it, it was pretty depressing because there were no positive groups at that time. Now there are, but you're talking about 14 years ago, and it was basically doom and gloom. If you have MS, you sit home, there's no exercise, and basically deteriorate and possibly end up in a wheelchair. It
Yeah.
took me a little bit of time to digest that, and I was kind of depressed for about a year, almost a year and a half, where I sat at home and I refused to go out. I wasn't working anymore. I didn't go to the gym anymore. I just thought, my life was over. And it was a pretty rough year to year and a half after that diagnosis.
Mm. I can imagine. And yeah, mine was quite similar. I mean, I felt the same way as you did, and it was just awful. And when you're newly diagnosed and you're already overwhelmed with this feeling of, oh gosh, like what is this? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my future? And then you go online and you see all these negative stories and you just think, oh my goodness me. It's like
Yeah,
it's
yeah. What happened here? How did I get this?
yeah. What's this all about? I
Right,
remember when I was first diagnosed, the thought that continuously went through my head was, what did I do to deserve this? And I was
right.
thinking very negatively, and I was in that kind of state of mind at the time.
Well, luckily for me, I mean, I was a youth pastor and I'm very rooted in my faith. So I never really had that idea as, why me? I just had the idea of what do I do? How do I navigate this disease? Is this really going to do what they say it's going to do to me? And I had to really kind of reevaluate my life and how do I fight this thing? And it took some time, as with you, on what you have to do to beat this.
Yeah, definitely. How long would you say that it kind of took you to kind of, I didn't want to say accept it as such, but like get to kind of in terms with it?
Well, it was about a year and a half that I woke up one morning and I looked in the mirror and I said, who's this guy here? This is not the guy that I am.
Mm.
I had withered my body down from about 200 pounds of muscle to about 160 pounds of nothing. And I didn't even recognize myself anymore. And I just looked in the mirror and I said, you're a fighter. You've got to fight this thing.
Yeah.
And the way that I knew to do it was to get back in the gym and figure out a way to build my muscles again.
Yeah, and that's what you did, and then some, which is amazing. So yeah, gosh. Um, what do you think the hardest part of the illness is to accept?
The fact that it's incurable and that there's nothing you can do to fix it per se, other than eating right, exercising, having the right mindset, and battling it that way. But there's no cure. So that's kind of hard to realize that we have an incurable disease. It's not like we've got the flu and we'll get over it in
Yeah.
a couple of weeks. This is with us, and no matter what we do, and no matter how hard we fight it, it's still in our body, and that's hard to accept.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of made harder as well by other people. I don't know whether you've had this, but people have told me like, "Oh, I really hope that you get better," and all of that sort of thing. And I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not,"
Yeah, how about this one,
Like,
Jesse? Hey, you look great. I can't believe you have a disease.
oh yeah, yeah. I know their heart's in the right place, but sometimes, yeah,
Yeah, they don't
you know
get
what
it.
I mean. So, if you could go back in time to that moment, back then, what do you think you would say to yourself, and how did you kind of get through that negative phase into that positive phase?
Well, The way I got through it is basically putting myself back into the gym, into an environment where I thrive. You know, I've been a gym rat my whole life. From bodybuilding was later in my life. I was a boxer and a martial artist for many, many years. And then I became a bodybuilder. So for me, putting myself back into the gym was that healing process for me. If I had something to say to myself back then that I know now is, hey, there's a lot of great things happening with this disease because of what you're doing. So, you know, hang in there, Dave. You know, you're going to be helping tens of thousands of people worldwide. You know, there's a purpose for this disease, and you just have to suck it up and do what you have to do.
Yeah, totally. I think you came out of that, in my opinion, anyway, quite quickly. So you said it was about a year and a half.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah,
Yeah. Mine took about
yeah.
4 years.
Well, yeah. Like I said, I was pretty quick. I wish it was even quicker. I mean, you know, knowing what I know now, I wish it was only, you know, 2 weeks. But when I did make this decision to go back in the gym, I never made the decision to help other people. I made the decision to help myself become a bodybuilder again.
Yeah.
Becoming what I am now, where we have a charity and we're helping people and doing that, that came later when I met my wife, Kendra, who basically said to me, you know, you're doing great for yourself. You stood on stage, you know, you got a trophy. Everybody's telling you how great you are, but how are you helping anybody? You know, you're inspiring people, but really that's all you're doing. Let's help them. Let's literally teach people how to get fit despite having MS. And that's really the biggest turning point in my life with MS, is when Kendra said to me over 8 years ago, we need to start a charity to help people with MS do what you're doing, and that's Beat It Through Fitness.
That's amazing. So Kendra, we kind of briefly mentioned at the start, but Kendra is your other half, your wife. She was
Yes,
a registered nurse.
yes, she's been a nurse for over 20 years now, and she actually had worked with people with MS when we met. So
Mm.
she knew the devastation of the disease. She had patients that she literally had to feed that had MS because they were
Wow.
that advanced. So she knew what she was getting into when she married me. But she saw, you know, my resilience. She saw my determination
Yeah.
and my drive to not let MS take over my life and tell me what it's going to do. And once she saw that, that's when she really said, we have to help other people. It can't just be about you, Dave.
Mm. That's crazy. And so how did that make you feel, knowing that she was looking after people who were, more advanced in their MS journey?
Well, it made me a little nervous at the beginning because I thought to myself, well, in her mind, up here in her head, she sees MS as a disease there where there's no return. You're just going to
Mm.
keep getting worse. She never met anyone that did what I was doing with MS. So
Yeah.
that was a little bit, you know, worrisome. But once she saw what I was doing, it became very apparent to her that there is a way to beat this disease. You can fight it. You don't need to be in a wheelchair, you know. And I'm not going to say that fitness is the answer to everything with MS, because it's not. You know, there are times where the body just loses its control with MS and there's nothing you can do about it, no matter how hard you try. So I never want anybody to think that I'm saying that if you go to the gym and you eat right and you think right, you're going to jump out of a wheelchair or you're never going to be there. I don't know what tomorrow will bring for me with MS. So I certainly can't tell anybody else what MS will or won't do. But I will tell them, and I know this for a fact, that if you put your mind in the right place, you go to the gym or exercise at home, and you eat an anti-inflammatory diet, it's definitely better for you than not doing that.
Of course, yeah. And I think, as with us as, people with MS, I think we do all have a responsibility to take, to look after ourselves the best way that we can do.
Yes, absolutely. We
Mm.
can't let MS dictate our lives. You know,
Absolutely.
we have goals, we've got dreams, we have a life, we have families. You know, we can't let it tell us you cannot do this or that. And once you have that mindset that you're not going to let it dictate your life, you have a way better chance of living completely fulfilling life with this disease.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, thanks for that, David. That's been amazing. Enabled Warriors, that's it for part 1. In the next part, we'll discuss the amazing things that David has done since his diagnosis. And Warriors, look out for part 2 coming on Wednesday. If there's anything that we've spoken about so far that you can relate to, then please let us know in the comments. And remember to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening today. Are you ready to fight back against your chronic illness and go from being disabled to enabled? Do you want to be an enabled warrior? Someone who is brave, strong, and confident, and someone who is ready to find a way to achieve awesome things despite a diagnosis. This is your invitation. Check out disabledtoenabled.com for articles and reviews to find out how you can become enabled too. If you think this podcast is better than sleeping in on Sundays, tickle that subscribe or follow button. Want to ask your questions to future guests? Make sure to share the episode with someone who needs some inspiration. Join the Enabled Warriors tribe on Facebook and look out for our question posts. Before we go, check out Disabled to Enabled on Instagram and stay enabled.